the sequel to an all-time classic. Hopefully it continues the trend of being creepy through its atmosphere and imagery. I bet it'll still be subtle and not too over the top. Huh. Well, at least we know the budget's higher. Welcome back, everybody, to my look at the Halloween franchise. This week, the nightmare isn't over with Halloween 2. The original Halloween was not an instant success upon its release. Critics were surprisingly not too fond of it, and the box office returns were slim. However, after more glowing reviews, including one from Roger Ebert, word of mouth spread and audiences flocked to the theaters to see Carpenter's film. With a budget of $350,000, the movie went on to gross $47 million, becoming one of the most profitable movies in cinema history. This would inevitably spawn the copycats like Friday the 13th to pretty much take the formula of Halloween, having a small budget, placing young teens in danger of a nearby killer, but they ramped up the violence and nudity. This was the birth of the 80s slashers that dominated horror. Naturally, with its success, producer Irwin Yablans decided that a sequel to Halloween should be made. Carpenter was approached to direct the follow-up, but he was busy working on The Fog. This would lead to some complications.
And I said, yeah, we're going to do another movie with John Carpenter. We're going to do 2 more movies with him. We're going to do The Fog, and then we're going to do Halloween 2. Not long after, Bob Raimi at Embassy announced that he was going to do The Fog with John Carpenter. I was pretty upset. I was livid. I called Carpenter, and I got nowhere with him. And I did the only thing I could at that point. I sued them both. To settle the case, we agreed to let Carpenter do The Fog with Embassy, and we got the commitment for Halloween 2.
So now Carpenter was pretty much obligated to work on Halloween 2, even though he wasn't overly thrilled with the idea. He handed directing duties over to Rick Rosenthal, but wrote the script with Deborah Hill once again. He's been pretty much quoted as saying that the writing process involved him opening up six-packs and wondering what the hell he was going to do. The final result would be a continuation of Michael's Halloween Night Rampage in 1978, but set mostly in a hospital, with a twist reveal that would essentially shape the rest of the series. Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasence returned to play their respective roles as the heroes, while Dick Warlock was chosen to replace Nick Castle as Michael Myers. Would it be possible to create a worthy sequel to a beloved classic? Let's find out. So the movie begins with the song Mr. Sandman and a recap to the ending of the original. I know these were necessary back then since people didn't have home media at their fingertips, but you all very well know I'm not a fan of them. I'll leave it at that. Everything plays out the same, except after discovering Michael has disappeared, Loomis's reaction is that of shock instead of the creepier "I knew this would happen" look in the original. He reaches out to the neighbor to call the police, but they're not helpful.
Is this some kind of joke? I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight. You don't know what death is.
Loomis has the best lines in the franchise. If you don't agree, you're lying to yourself. The opening credits with the pumpkin are recreated, but we get a new spin on it, including the updated synthesized theme. Definitely can tell they're trying to recreate the magic of the first one, but I like the opening here. Love the reveal of the skull inside the pumpkin, and I actually really dig the new take on the Halloween theme. Carpenter composed it again, and while it's nowhere near as good as the piano score, I'm oddly a fan of it. We cut to Michael's POV, skulking around the alleyways, but he hides after spotting Loomis flagging down Sheriff Brackett.
I shot him 6 times! I shot him 6 times! I shot him in the heart!
So wait, how many times did you shoot him?
I shot him 6 times!
Oh, okay, just double checking. One thing I'll note about Loomis in this one is that he is way more frantic than he originally was. He remains relatively calm in the original in order to not cause a panic, but here he's running around screaming about how they've got to find the man he shot 6 times. I don't know, I think you may cause a stir in the neighborhood acting like that. Back to Michael, he walks in on an unsuspecting elderly couple, but leaves them be and just steals their knife. He moves on over to their teenage neighbor Alice and casually sneaks into her house. As you can see, this movie is going to be a little more gratuitous with the violence. Laurie is carted off into an ambulance and transported to the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital to receive treatment for her wounds. Luckily for her, she gets the drunkest person in the building, Dr. Mixter, to take care of her. Cut to Loomis and Brackett searching the streets for any sign of Michael. When someone with the same appearance is spotted, Loomis just whips out his gun ready to open fire, but Oh my god, that is so ridiculous, but I can't help but love it. Why was the cop car going at full speed? He even gets out and says, he came out of nowhere, I couldn't stop. So what? If the obviously not Michael wasn't there, would he have just slammed into the van? And the goddamn explosion is such overkill, but it's hilarious. I'm probably going to hell for reacting like this, but I don't care. The crew is unsure of whether or not it really is Michael, but Deputy Hunt shows up to inform Brackett that they found his daughter Annie dead, and they flee the scene. Guess we're just gonna leave the charred corpse for someone else to handle. Back at the hospital, paramedic Jimmy is creeping on Laurie, but head nurse Alves is able to give him the boot. Doesn't stop the movie from forcing a romance here. We then see Brackett finding Annie's dead body, blaming Loomis for her death. He leaves, leaving Deputy Hunt in charge of Loomis, who believes the man they ran over wasn't Michael and the search should continue.
The teenager was taken across town to Haddonfield Memorial Clinic.
Shocker, Michael is still alive and now knows Laurie's location. At the hospital, we get to meet some of the other characters, including security guard Mr. Garrett, Nurse Karen, Nurse Janet, and paramedic Bud. All of them really just cannon fodder with nothing memorable, except for Bud, who is the complete package of being a tool and a pervert.
Amazing grace, come sit on my face. Don't make me cry, I need your pie.
Jimmy spends some more time with Laurie, telling her it was Michael Myers that went after her, but she can't help but wonder why he chose her. Well, the pure act of randomness is much scarier, but I'm getting this sneaking suspicion they're gonna defeat that motive with one that makes less sense. After discovering the phones are dead, Mr. Garrett is sent to do some investigating. After a cliche cat jump scare, he discovers that the storage room has been broken into and tries to find the intruder. Where have I seen a cop getting hit in the head with a hammer before? At the coroner's office, Loomis and the police investigate if the man killed earlier was Michael, but the dentist identifies the victim as being 17 years old, and Michael is 21. So they head over to the Myers house, which is being vandalized by the citizens of Haddonfield.
The tribe. One of their number was butchered. This is the wake.
Such a weird thing to say. I know he's an intellectual guy, but it's such a random line. Who talks like that? He goes on to tell Deputy Hunt about how evil Michael really is, similar to his brilliant monologue from the original. However, they're interrupted by some teens who are worried about their friend Ben Tramer, who left a party drunk but never made it home. Turns out he's 17 years old and is wearing a stupid mask. Who wants to break the news to him? There's a report that an elementary school was broken into, and it looks to be Michael's doing, so they make haste. At the hospital, Bud and Nurse Karen turn things up a bit by hopping into the hot tub in the therapy room. When things warm up too quickly, Bud goes to check the temperature, but he's strangled from behind. Michael approaches Karen, who thinks it's Bud, and gets a little frisky, but she's in for a surprise. This is an awesome death scene. You can almost feel how hot the water is, and seeing the flesh gradually peeling off because of the heat is a nice touch. Over at the elementary school, Loomis and crew discover that Michael broke in, randomly stabbed a knife into a drawing, which Loomis interprets as a meaning for his sister, and the word Samhain written in blood on the wall. It means the Lord of Darkness, marking the end of summer and the beginning of the festival of Samhain. Really not sure why, if, how it's important to anything, but apparently Michael was aware and wanted to do some finger painting. They're interrupted by Nurse Chambers, who Loomis somehow doesn't recognize the night after they were together. She's there to let him know that by order of the governor that he's to leave Haddonfield and return to Smith's Grove. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Nurse Jill discovers that Laurie has had a reaction to the medication and is unresponsive. Nurse Janet runs to get help from Dr. Mixter, but she finds him with a needle in his eye, unaware she will face a similar fate. Dean Cundy returned to do the cinematography, and I like that he was able to pull off that slow reveal of Michael in the shadows again behind Janet. I've also expressed before that I hate anything involving the eyes, so seeing Mixer with a needle in his eye, then Janet with one injected fairly close to hers makes me squirm. Michael moves on to Laurie's room and gives her bed a good stabbing, only to find out that she's not there and has escaped. Jimmy and Nurse Jill discover they can't seem to find anyone in the hospital. Like, anyone, this is the emptiest hospital I've ever seen, and go looking for any signs of life. This is greatly unsuccessful after Jimmy finds Nurse Alves in a room completely drained of her blood. He idiotically rushes too fast, slips, and falls in the pool of blood. Outside, Jill discovers that her car won't start and all the tires in the parking lot have been slashed. Naturally, she runs back inside instead of going to look for help literally anywhere else. She's able to find Laurie, but...
Wait, Laurie!
Ah, so cool. Michael casually stepping out from behind, no music cue, then gets Jill in the back, easily lifting her up off the ground. The silence towards the end makes this creepier to me, and we get more evidence at just how powerful Michael is. A new chase commences, and I gotta admit, I like it just as much as the one in the original. She's nearly caught in the basement, and there's a wait for the elevator that is excruciatingly tense as Michael creeps towards her until she does manage to make it outside and hides in a car. Is it better than the original chase? No way, but I think it does a good job of capturing that intensity that was created in the first to a degree. While Loomis is being escorted out of Haddonfield, Nurse Chambers decides now is the perfect time to reveal something to him that he should have known from the get-go.
That girl, that Strode girl, that's Michael Myers' sister.
This has always felt like a very weird addition to Michael Myers' mythology, despite it being the foundation for the rest of the franchise. I prefer that Michael not have a motive for his senseless acts as opposed to his need to go after his blood relatives. It's the randomness that makes it much scarier. But Carpenter was downing beer for most of the screenwriting process and figured he had to add in something new and landed on Michael and Laurie being siblings. I somehow can't imagine he doesn't regret his choice. Loomis forces the police officer to head to the Haddonfield Hospital, where Jimmy manages to find Laurie in the car she's hiding in. But he just sorta conks out, and we're left to assume that he's dead. Laurie gets out of the car just as Loomis's crew arrives, and she tries to yell out to them, but she's too weak. That is until they actually enter the hospital and can't hear her when she screams out for help. This alerts Michael to her location, and she rushes to the hospital's doors, allowing Loomis to let her inside. That's fucking awesome. Loomis shoots Michael several more times and puts him down, but seeing that he's still breathing, he orders Chambers to call the police on the car radio. The dumbass cop ignores Loomis's instructions to stay away from Michael and gets his throat slit in the process. Laurie and Loomis find a place to hide, but Michael tracks them down, stabs Loomis, and closes in on Laurie. However, he doesn't realize how good of a shot she is. The blood tears coming out of Michael's eyes is one of my favorite shots in the franchise. There's just something about it that yells badass to me. He begins to blindly swing around, but Loomis is still alive, and he and Laurie work together trying to confuse Michael by turning on the gas tanks in the room. Laurie runs out as Loomis stays behind to quite literally go out in a blaze of glory.
It's time, Michael.
You'd think that would be the end, but Michael is still persistent as a ball of fire before finally collapsing and burning alive. That morning, Laurie is loaded into an ambulance for the second time as the movie ends with a haunting tune.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
Alright, maybe not so much haunting as it is confusing. My overall thoughts on Halloween 2. I have a lot of fun with this one. While it's nowhere near as good as the original, it definitely feels the closest to me in terms of capturing some of that magic from the first. I enjoy that it just picks up immediately on the same night, like you could combine the two movies into one giant film and it works perfectly. However, the mysteriousness of Myers, which made him incredibly scary, is lost. You see far too much of him just roaming around, making him less of a malevolent force of nature rolling into town. I always loved how he was essentially the boogeyman, appearing and disappearing, seemingly being a human, but having a supernatural edge that lets him be everywhere. Here, he's just kind of out and about, not hiding too often in the shadows, and really just giving off that cliche maniac in a mask look. And for anyone who thinks the mask is a little different, it's actually the same exact one they used for the first. It was just a bit of a tighter fit around Dick Warlock's head. Speaking of, I think Warlock does a fine job playing Michael, but his movements are far too robotic and not natural natural. In the original, John Carpenter instructed Nick Castle to just walk normally. He felt that walking like a normal person made the character scarier. Still, Warlock did a good job, and I believe I'm watching relatively the same character for the most part. I pointed out that the violence was ramped up from the original, which for all intents and purposes had to be done. It had to keep up with the slashers that were being released at the time. Ironically, Friday the 13th was a Halloween ripoff, but Halloween 2 was almost a ripoff of Friday the 13th. The kills in this one are pretty good and include 3 that I'd put in my top 10. Karen's boiling bath, Janet's needle to the temple, and Jill's scalpel lift. All of them much more gratuitous, but hey, I think they pulled them off perfectly as they entered the age of slashers. The characters are a bit of a drop-off, but they're not completely unlikable. Even creepy Jimmy hitting on a girl recovering from a killer's attacks isn't the worst, it just feels like the romance is being forced. Unfortunately, all the nurses really blend in and don't leave much of an impression except for their deaths that they get at the hands of Michael. But I'll admit, Bud is kinda funny. He's a douche, but I don't dislike him. His Amazing Grace rendition always gets a chuckle out of me. Laurie unfortunately doesn't have a hell of a whole lot to do until the last 20 minutes, as she's been reduced to a hospital bed for a majority of the runtime. And the big revelation that she's actually Michael's sister is conflicting. While it does become a plot point that's a driving force for sequels, again, it lessens the scariness of Michael knowing that his entire goal is to wipe out his bloodline. And Loomis is a little more frantic here, but I still love him. His personality is cranked up, but he still has some good little speeches, and you can tell he just really wants Myers dead to end the chaos. I feel bad that I may be giving the impression that I don't like this sequel, but I really do. It's just hard to not compare it to the masterpiece that preceded it. Dean Cundy's cinematography is once again great. I love the hospital setting since they freak me out. The chase in the basement is tense, and I love the final battle with Michael getting his eyes shot out and blown up. It's a fun follow-up to a film that's a little more serious. So while Myers' mystique is slightly damaged, the characters are downgraded, and the sibling motive is introduced. I love this one for its kills, ability to keep a similar mood to the original, and having an awesome finale. I give Halloween 2 4 scalpels out of 5. But let me know what you guys think. Do you actually prefer this one over the first? How do you feel about giving Michael the motive to kill his family? And what was your favorite kill? Don't forget to subscribe and follow my Twitter and Instagram. Links to those are in the description. Next week, don't expect to see Michael because we're taking a look at Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Until next time, peace!